pick his brain about what's going on out there, what's going on with FDIC this year, and kind of, what thoughts he has moving forward in the fire service with these unprecedented times. Just want to remind everybody to mute their mic when they're not talking, and if you have a question, just raise your hand or type it into that chat box, and I'll try to manage it that way. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Bobby Halton. Chief, thank you so much for being here with us today, and what's on your mind?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be hanging out with you guys. Of course, some of my favorite people, and we have the annual award for FDIC, which will be this year. We'll be given out on a Saturday or a Sunday rather at FDIC. So FDIC dates have officially moved. We're going to be in August. So starting on the 19th and 20th will be hands-on, and that's a Thursday and a Friday. And then we'll be doing the main program on Saturday and Sunday, and classrooms Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So same old FDIC, just a little bit different dates. We just didn't want to have another year go by without FDIC. So working with the Indiana Convention Center, and oddly enough, you guys are going to enjoy this, we had to negotiate a great opportunity with our friends in law enforcement who had the convention center for that week, but have been kind enough to allow us to kind of scoot in at the end of their conference so that we could, do an FDIC. And so we hope that by August that, with a robust vaccination program and folks taking advantage of that, as well as the, herd immunity, for lack of a better word, or a lack of better understanding, hopefully will be pretty widespread so that we won't have some of the restrictions that are currently in place in terms of social distancing and space and whatnot. So that, at least that's our hope. And as with everything, during this pandemic, all bets are basically the property of the House, and things could change, obviously, that are outside of our control. But so that's our plan right now. All of the instructors have been notified. All the hands-on instructors have been notified. All of the attendees have been notified as of today. And so far, of the 25,000 plus pre-registered folks, we haven't had any calls about canceling their registration, which is a pretty promising sign. Now, obviously, some will come in, but so far, so good. It's like the man who jumped off the 100-story building as he passed each floor of the Empire State Building. He passed the windows, and he said, "So good so far." And we're hoping it ends better for us, but so good so far. And so that's the plan. We'll be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Exhibit 4 is going to open up on Saturday afternoon and be open through Monday. And we're really looking forward to it. So our good friends in Indiana are actually going to be going through the Sweet 16. Actually, the whole March Madness is going to be in Indianapolis. So that'll be a good kind of canary in the coal mine, if you will, to see how it's going to work out. And I apologize, I'm in my car. I just got notified that my chemo got pushed back, so I'll be able to actually take a break and go home for a few minutes. So if I do get home in time to go on a non-shaky format, I will, but I'm actually driving. So remember, comedians in cars, this is old fireman in cars. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about with the instructors, and I think that, I think as a group, I think that sometimes our meta-narratives, major narratives are big things, and our meta stuff, which is, obviously, basic suppression, handline movement, extrication, obviously EMS. Our meta-narratives sometimes obscure some of the smaller, more nuanced things that I think as instructors, especially the instructor society, we need to constantly be evaluating the field for those things that may have kind of gone under the radar, that need reinforcement because they don't have that force of like our lockout tagouts. Got to do this every year. It's mandatory. It's the law, right? Our EMS research, mandatory. Got to do it. And many organizations have company drill and standard that become apparent. But some things we don't. And it was recently brought to my attention by Jerry Knapp, who's a you guys know Jerry Knapp out of Rockland County as American member of the Instructor Society. And Jerry pointed out to me that we really haven't been keeping our eye on explosive gas emergencies. Jerry was reminded of it kind of dramatically about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when he and his captain were blown off the porch of a home that exploded from a natural gas leak in front of them and hurled them across the yard. They survived. They had injuries. They survived. But looking back over the past just 10 years, we've had multiple fatal incidents, and not just civilians, but firefighters that have been killed in explosive gas emergencies. And so Jerry and myself and a few others are now working to come up with a couple of really important programs, because understanding fire behavior and all that good stuff is great, but every fire happens in context. And so you can only be, what you need are the fundamentals to look at, and the fundamentals of sudden change, right? The only reliable indicator of a flashover, as we all well know, is a sudden and rapid increase in temperature for no apparent reason, and it's shortly followed by a Hail Mary and either jumping out a window or a door. So the issue that Jerry brought up, I thought was really, really important. And another great voice in the fire service came forward, and I'm sure many of you know him as well, Jay Counselor. And he reminded me that our extrication work, although critically important, is also in constant need of refinement. And he was pointing out the need for more updates on laminate glass. So there's a couple of topics I wanted to talk to you guys about today in terms of capture and how do we do that, and bringing things to the fore, and then how do we put together, great presentations and raise people's awareness. And one of the problems that we've always had as instructors, and I know the society, and I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on it, has always been wonderful at doing this. I hate the stuff that, as a fire chief, you're always taught, never go into the budget meeting and say, if you don't do this, babies are going to die, because that people just will go tone deaf the minute you go to that kind of hyperbole. And so I'm always very hesitant to say, we have to do this or people are going to die in explosive. And natural gas is not the only explosive gas out there, right? We've got propane, which is obviously heavier than air. So, you've got to be constantly alerted to detection. But the thing about these gases is that we're always concerned about LEL, right? Your lower explosive limit, and then flammable range, obviously. But those aren't the two things. So what's interesting about it is that you need a fifth detector, because we're all carrying 4 gas detectors now. But you need a 5th detector, and it's called a metal oxide detector. And Jerry and I and the team did a little bit of homework. And there's only one department in America that carries them on every rig, and that's the FDNY. And it's odd that of all the things that the FDNY does, that this has gone largely unnoticed by the American Fire Service, that they carry a metal oxide detector with them all the time. And I would just ask this group real quickly, how many of you are familiar with and utilize a metal oxide detector on every call, a gas call? Anybody? Anybody familiar with them at all? Huh, fascinating. It's the only way you're going to know if you're in a dangerous situation with natural gas and several other gases. So that's going to be my cause celeb for the coming year: laminate glass and metal oxide gas detection. And what's important about that is that the LEL is great, but you're not going to hear LELs on, say, natural gas until you get like around the 400 pp, parts per million. Whereas what you need to be worried about is far less than that. Now, we can smell natural gas because of mercaptan at about 1 pp per million, but so it's just interesting, right? We're so anyway, long story monotonous. I was asked to come up with what my cause celeb was going to be for this year, and I'm taking a hard turn from some of the things we've been looking at. I'm still very concerned about, obviously, cancer. It's a very important subject for me in my life and as well as my professional career. I'm still very concerned about mental health issues and always will be. But, I think the things that are going to kill us outright without warning, explosive gas, is something that we really need to be focused on. And then laminated glass, in terms of accessing patients and making extrication more rapid and effective, is going to be my secondary point of focus for training for me this year, as I go about and talk and do things like that. If we're allowed to go out about and talk, depending on where you live. So that's what I brought. I was told by Lee I better have two things on my Christmas list to talk about. So Lee, there's my Christmas list of things that I wanted to talk about, and I'll turn it back over to the group.
Thanks, Chief. It's something that I've been struggling with, which a lot of people on this call have already witnessed firsthand, is this whole virtual teaching online and how difficult that can be to engage with the group and engage with your students. I've gone so far as to record lectures that just turn out horrible because you don't have that positive engagement. You don't have that question and answer period. Even when you pose a question to a group online, everybody gets really gun shy for some reason, where I feel like I'm kind of more empowered to say something in the comforts of my own office or home. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts or anybody else's thoughts of what, we're trying to reinvent it a little bit during this COVID scare, but what are your thoughts as far as the education being currently delivered and what's good and what's bad about it? Thoughts from the group or thoughts from Chief?
Well, I think a lot of it's been absolutely excellent. And I think that there's a place, and I think Norm will agree with me, for every kind of modality we can imagine, whether it's hands-on, whether it's virtual, whether it's classroom. I think every component needs to be explored and utilized, and I don't think any one component of our cadre, of our quiver, if you think of it in archery terms, and I always like archery terms because the term sin is to miss in archery. So when you sin, you miss. So I always like that. But anyway, in your quiver, you have many arrows, right? It's just another arrow in the quiver that we've been kind of using kind of heavily. And to your point, Stefan, well, I think it's funny. Remember when you have your movie camera and you're, say, a family gathering, a wedding, or a birthday party or whatnot, and you turn the camera on your family and everybody freezes, right?
Yeah.
That's the same thing online when you ask a question. It's like everybody goes, because the camera's on them suddenly, right? So you need to find a couple of people who are completely egotistical, narcissistic, absolute nutbags like me that love the camera and get them to go first. And then that kind of breaks the ice. At least I found that in terms of having questions answered. But I think a lot of it's been absolutely great. And I think that I love webcasts. I'm a big webcast fan. I learn a ton from them. And I think that what they do is they plant seeds, right? Like if you watch a webcast or a podcast, you hear something and it plants a seed. And then the next thing you know, you're like hell-bent to find out as much as you can about whatever that seed germinated, right? And whether that's attending a class in person, whether that's doing some hands-on, but so I think they're tremendously useful. Now, I don't think they're the be-all and the end-all. I don't think you can send somebody through, Firefighter 1 virtually and then put them out on the line. I just don't think that's a good idea at all. But do I think you can give them some of the cognitive skills that they need to go take the didactic and start to practice their hands-on? Absolutely. I think the young people they call it flipping the classroom, right? Where you do a bunch of stuff up front so that you can save time and you don't have to do as much, PowerPoint and explanation, and you can go right into some of the hands-on side of it. I don't know what the rest of you think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think with the guys here at my fire department, they're picking off the low-hanging fruit. That's the kind of the boring, monotonous stuff that seems to be a struggle in the classroom when you got 20 guys in front of you and you're talking about, whatever that is. And they can pick that off on their own time and crank 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 30 minutes. And that way, when it's boots on the ground, you can really hammer it out. And that flipped classroom, as I'm sure a lot of you know, I'm a super, super big fan of all that.
And they can pick the instructor that they want that might resonate with them. Like some folks are Ray McCormick fans, some guys are Kirk Isaacson fans, some guys are Kirk Allen fans, some guys are Seth Baker fans, some guys are Anthony Avilo fans, and all those cats that I just mentioned all talk a lot about water movement. So you can go pick the cat that that resonates with you, right? I mean, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Who else has comments or suggestions out there?
Seth, this is Chris Broger here.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're up in the frozen north of Canada here. Let's have Bobby in our classroom. So, a comment, just if you're doing this virtual, we're all doing this as fire departments, we're doing this virtual style of training or narrated PowerPoint, or this type of technology is very easy to do and use. And now the beauty about that, then if it's narrated by you, the author of that PowerPoint, then you've got that consistent minimum message that they are receiving. But the other way of how can you engage your crews or your new recruits? I've got an idea for that. Is that do you have like a chat line on each of their webinar style of or teams? If you have that type of chat, then you give them a percentage of marks or grade to participate in that chat line. So if you say, I'm going to give you a 15% or a 20% percentage by being involved in that chat line, then you will open up that. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, that's excellent. I actually took a couple college courses that was a percentage of your grade was being able to interact with other students and with the instructors, and I couldn't agree with you more. That's really, really good advice there, is integrating that into a learning management software program. Phil, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I've been one of the opportunities I found during this time was to sit in on some training, virtual training that was going on with some Marine Corps ROTC students. And what I found super interesting about the instructor in that is that he sort of set this ground rule that he didn't. One of the things that I think is common with instructors is to throw a question out to the group and then look for body language to see who wants or is interested in responding. You know, like they put their hand up or they look at you or whatever the case may be, which all of those common cues for us instructors don't work in this environment, right? So the way he did it, which had, I think, several positive attributes, was he just set it as a premise in his intro that if you're in the room, you're in the game. And he just, instead of putting things out there generally, he went specifically. So he'd say, you know, Bobby Halton, what do you think about this object? Or Pete Van Dorp, tell me what you think about his ideas, or whatever it was, to actually call the students out individually. And one was that some of the benefits, one was that the students never knew, right, when they were going to get called on, which required them to remain engaged in the discussion the entire time. Two, by keeping track of it himself, he could make sure that he was making sure that everybody got an opportunity to participate in the event, even when he had, you know, he was trying to keep it below 20, which is still a pretty big number over an hour and a half. But just the idea that instead of putting it out to the general group, think about going specifically and keeping track somehow so that you can make sure, as the instructor, you can make sure you get to everybody during the session.
Point well taken. You know, I just, believe it or not, took a OSHA 510 class because they finally offered it online, and it was over 4 days, and you had to be completely engaged for 7 hours the entire time because you were randomly called on, and that was part of your grade as well. So very, very good advice there. It was super stressful. It was even more stressful than being in the actual classroom, to be honest, because there's a lot more distractions being at home.
I think that's one of the advantages of having gone through this stuff with COVID is we're not really doing anything that wasn't available to us before or we weren't using before. We're just using it. We're learning to use it the way it's meant to be used. You know, we used to sort of just take little bites at it and kind of sort of, you know, send out some online training and let the guys do it at their leisure and all that. But that's not maximizing its capability. What we're doing now, in a large degree, what Phil described is maximizing its capability. You just have to change your game a little bit. In our leadership class in Illinois, we use a similar, even in a classroom, we use an app called Socrative. And so when the instructor poses a question to the discussion group, they all have to answer on the app. And then, so again, they're all on, on point. They know they have to respond, and the instructor can see all the answers then before he starts to engage the group. So no one person is put on the spot right away. And it also helps you follow up after the class, right? So if you miss somebody, or if somebody didn't participate as much as you might have wanted to, but you do have their written responses in the chat or whatever, you can follow up with those guys and, reach out to them that way. So there's a lot of, potential in all these applications we're using now, and I think we're finally learning how to use them.
Peter, what was that app called?
Socrative.
Okay.
It's a free app. It's really easy to use. It's very intuitive, and it's been a godsend to the class. It really has. Anytime you have a class when you want a lot of student interaction, and I know it's not the only one, but that's the one we stumbled upon.
Jason, do you have something to add?
Yeah, Seth, we all struggle with engaging our students electronically or virtually now. One of the things that we found really beneficial is to set some ground rules for the virtual classes. And we started using an acronym called SMART, which is sit up and pay attention, because we were finding folks hanging out on their bed or couch or not even paying attention, but it was on. M was for mute your mic when not speaking. Obviously, we all struggle with that in the presentation formats. And then A was activate your thinking. So we wanted you to be thinking and engaged for the class. R was relate to the topic. So if you could carry a story or an incident or an experience that related to the topic, we wanted you to share it with the group. And then T was turn your camera on. And we've pretty much mandated and reinforced that if you're in electronic virtual class, your camera is going to be on so that we can see that you're paying attention and engaged and activated. So that's a little acronym that we're using here locally, and we've been having pretty good luck with that. So
I love that. That's good stuff. That's something my kids need to be reminded when they're in virtual school as well. Chief Buckman, Chief Buckman,
I think. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Seth, my comments would be this is a unique opportunity, I think, for instructors to become more relevant in the delivery of the products, because the students are going to depend on us in this distance learning environment, in this virtual environment. They're going to depend on the instructors to give them a little more guidance. In the in-person classes, the instructors may have been a little bit more show. Our egos were there to be in front of the group and influence them. But I really think that, and I think Bobby said it originally, this is the new normal. The society, I think, has an opportunity also to help develop courses that teach instructors how to be on television, because that's what we are. We're on television, but yet we've never been taught how to talk to a camera, how to address a camera, how to act around a camera. And it's not in the ISFSI instructor manuals or any of the instructor books out there, but that's something that, I think the society could look at help developing. Thank you.
That's good stuff. Chief Halton?
Well, everybody's points are fantastic. And I think to dovetail on Peter's very quickly, I like to play the role of the ombudsman. It kind of comes naturally to me. One of the things that I've been able to experience with my friends from the UK has been command level training, incident command training using simulation, but it's all virtual, which is virtual anyway. So now they just hooked it all up in between the stations. So basically the whole department, they can do a first alarm, second alarm, fire, and everybody's just basically sitting back in their fire stations, but they're going through incident command training, which is just a natural sequitur. And to the last point, which I think is phenomenal, I think it's funny. I've had the pleasure to teach public speaking courses for the last 25 years, and you go to do a public speaking course somewhere, you used to get, I don't know, somewhere between 15, 20 people. If you put up your public speaking course today for someone to come to, you sell out in about, 30 minutes. If you say you have 100 seat capacity, which is about all you can really manage, because to do a public speaking course, obviously, people have to speak, and you've got to give them time. So if you've got, say, a 2-day course, 100 folks is your maximum. A one-day course is basically about 25 people. So, it's fascinating that now we're seeing the need to actually teach people how to use their verbal cues, acuity, how to use pauses, how to use modalities and techniques that enhance different your ability to communicate, which heretofore people thought just came to, and nothing could further from the truth. There are very few people who are very natural public speakers. And when you're talking about public speaking online, if you really want to take it to that level, there the skill set becomes even more nuanced and idiosyncratic to the speaker, right? You have to find out what those particular tools that person might best implement for that particular material. And it's going to be different from material to material and person to person. But that's a phenomenal idea for the Instructor Society to start talking about developing public speaking, interpersonal communications, presentation skills, whatever you want to call it. But it's all the same thing, right? And where we're seeing a dearth of that is that we've gotten to the point where, and not to throw my sons under the bus, they're all in their mid-30s, but a few years back, one of my sons was home, and his twin brother was upstairs, and he's on his phone, and I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm texting." I said, "Who?" He said, "Ryan." I said, "He's upstairs." He goes, "Yeah, I don't want to talk to him." But he was texting him. So I'm like, well, what the hell is that, right? So now you've got this other form of communication, the text and these brief messages and this online stuff, whether it be Facebook or Parler or Twitter or MeWe or whatever, platform you're on, that people are substituting for communication and not working on your verbal skills and not working on your intuitive interpersonal skills, as someone mentioned earlier, reading other people's reactions, reading, body language is kind of a funny thing. I've seen so many people talk about body language classes, and most of them were charlatans and parlor games. But reading people is a real skill, right? And you can tell, when people are engaged and when they're hearing you and when they're not hearing you and when they're thinking about saying something while you're talking, or whether they're, on a fishing trip somewhere while you're talking to them about, hydraulics. So that's a really cool idea for the society, and I think it's a course that would be well attended, because irrespective of your professional career as a firefighter, being able to speak well and present well will help you in life in general. Pete, it might even help you find number 3 or 4. Is it teasing you, Peter?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the more when you're standing in front of people, the better you are at your own job too, and getting in front of the troops and getting in front of, your constituents or the people that you answer for. Brad, did you have something to add, Mr. French?
Just very briefly. And ironically enough, what I was going to say kind of has organically happened over in the chat box. And I've been kind of a slow adopter to some of the more modern instructional mechanisms. I think nothing beats an in-person, the dynamic of an in-person presentation. But with that being said, one of the things that I found a lot of value in is exactly what just started happening in that chat box, which is when you're in this environment, people can immediately start posting resources. And then, as opposed to if you're in a classroom, maybe you write stuff down, maybe you don't. But there, it's immediate. There's links and things like that, and people reiterating their thoughts and having some additional stuff in those chat boxes over to the side. And then, so when that conversation is over, that person maybe has opened up 4 or 5 windows or something like that from direct links in that chat box, to where as soon as that lesson is over, they're immediately diving right on top of those topics. We were doing it with Dan when Dan was doing basements the other day. We were busting out links to different videos and stuff like that in that chat box, and so people, I think a lot of the attendees were able to then immediately copy and paste those links into new windows, and as soon as that lesson was over, that follow-up process could start immediately. So I think there's a lot of value in that, posting resources to that chat box live in the middle of a class. That's one of the few positives that I personally have found out of this this change in the way we do business.
Love it. Anybody else have anything to add before we kind of switch gears here?
Sure. Can I go?
Yes, please, Tony.
I'll be that guy. I think it all sucks. I think that there's really not a whole lot of redeeming. I mean, I want to be in person. Maybe perhaps the redeeming value of one instructor and maybe 5 students, right? Because we can't have a very big classroom. But I'm not. I'll take the class though. I will take the class on how to be a user of all of these things. That's a good idea. But right now, I think this new norm, it's going to be tough to digest.
Dr. Reich, you have anything to add there? Put you on the spot, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm okay. I'm listening and trying to compare it with our experience in Germany. We're also switching a lot into all these e-learning and online training courses, and we find it sometimes interesting. We reach more people, but sometimes the interaction is less, and I think it's the same discussion which we have over here. Very similar.
Chief, I wanted to explore with you some comments that you sent to me about the whole notion of using trade schools and journeyman stature to count for credentialing and certifications and degree programs. That really super resonated with me because that's a big deal in my fire department. You know, we don't have a lot of college education in our fire department, nor do we have the desire to do that. But we have very sound tradesmen here that. Anyways, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Trying to unmute. Oh, there we go. I unmuted. There we go. There's an old guy for you. And I'm actually pulling into a parking spot, so it'll get better. Hopefully, it couldn't have gotten worse. So if you were getting seasick, I apologize, but I'll be ceasing to move for a moment. So yeah. So my third thing that I listed many things about capture and other thoughts that I have, which are probably irrelevant to the conversation at this point. But so trade school, we tell people, you know, you have to have a bachelor's degree to be, say, a battalion chief or a district chief. You have to have an associate's degree to be an assistant chief or deputy chief, or a bachelor's degree to be assistant chief, or whatever. Or you need a master's to be chief of department. Okay. Applicability of it, I don't know. Maybe you had to do research papers. I've heard that. Maybe you had to understand maybe some basic, you know, maybe if you took business management or something, or if you took governmental studies, it could help you. But what if your degree was in interpretive underwater dance? And not to put down interpretive underwater dance. I'm sure it's very, very important. I'm sure, you know, people are just crushing it in the real world with understanding that, or something as obscure, right? English lit, or like in my case, you know, mathematics and things like that, or philosophy, or things you're interested in. Higher education in general, I think, has become highly suspect, because I'll throw you back 10 years ago, and the National Fire Academy was not accepting online education in order to get into EFO. That was a battle we were having about 10 or 15 years ago with the National Fire Academy. Today, it's all we're doing is online education, and we're all okay with it now. So it's fascinating. Seneca once said, our children will be amazed at the things that are so apparent to them that we don't see right now. So for the last 30 years, 20 years, we've decided that higher education, albeit somewhat not that high. I recently took a course on one of these websites, and I don't want to use the name of it, but and it was such pablum, it was such nonsense, it was so awful that you basically had to regurgitate exactly what the presenter said in the preceding segments in order to move to the next segment. And you had to write these little sentences and paragraphs, and it was just gibberish. It was worthless. It wasn't education. It didn't teach you how to think. It didn't give you any skill set that was usable. It was just basically garbage. And you could take a bunch of these courses from this organization online, this school, and get a degree. a higher education degree. And it really wasn't a higher education degree. It was a degree in getting the wonderful ability to parrot back exactly what they told you to parrot back in the right bites. So contrast that to trade education and what we really do in the real world. And I'm not putting down higher education. I've got one, and I'm proud of it, and I love to learn. But I would never pursue a degree again, and I'm not alone in that. Nassim Taleb was one of the smartest people in the world. Many other very, 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 very accredited people have now gone into saying someone's personal education and growth cannot be measured by some of these institutions with their rigid parameters and their criteria. So that being said, as the premise, trade school. If you go to a structure fire and you're standing next to a firefighter, or your partner has built 100 homes or knows everything about electrical and HVAC systems, who's more valuable, him or the guy with the degree in Northwest German history? Just to throw a thing out to my buddy Richard there from Germany. Obviously, the guy with the construction experience and the HVAC experience. But we don't give him any credit when it comes to promotion or hiring or anything else. And I think that's a tragic flaw in our systems. I think that if someone has education from a trade school and experience at a trade, we should weigh that as valid as we do an associate's degree in human resource management or anything else. I think that it's more applicable. What about someone who's gone to automotive school and you're going to a motor vehicle accident, or you go out to motor vehicle accident after a motor vehicle accident? That cat is pretty darn valuable because he understands how those cars are put together today. He also can be a tremendous asset when it comes to your speccing and your purchasing and your maintenance, because that person, and I'm just being a little self-serving here because I'm a shade tree mechanic, on older cars, but that served me very well in the fire service, a basic understanding of mechanics. And my friends who were in the construction phase, when I was a kid, I pounded a lot of nails. So when the instructor was talking about a beam or a soffit or whatever, I knew what they were talking about. If the boss told me to, we had to go up to the scuttle, I knew what a scuttle was. You know what I mean? You knew what a 10-12 pitch was. That there's value. And I think the American Fire Service has missed a tremendous opportunity to connect with men and women who we really want as volunteers, as career amongst our ranks, and those are tradespeople. And the other side of it is that doing things with your hands and building things and fixing things is tremendously rewarding. And the men and women who are attracted to our field love to use their hands. They just do. I mean, you put a warthog in somebody's hands, or you put a rotary saw in somebody's hands, and they're just looking for, they're just looking for a door. They're looking for something to cut up, and try getting it out of their hands. I mean, once you got a tool in a firefighter's hands, you got claw marks in there when you try to take it away from them, because that's who we are. But for all of these years, they get no credit for going to trade school. They get no credit for knowing plumbing or electrical work or any of the trades. And I think one of the things that's on my bucket list before I leave the fire service is to say that no, the time is long past due, and that we rediscover our trades roots and how important they are to our profession. And I hope that others will join me in this. And I don't know amongst the group what you all did, but almost every firefighter I know says, yeah, I pounded nails, I did roofing, I did, you know what I mean? They worked with their hands, you know what I mean? And occasionally we get, the doctor, the lawyer, and we put them on the medic unit. I'm just teasing, it's a joke. The medics don't go crazy. I'm just making a joke. And that's the other thing. My other thing before I leave is to bring humor back into the fire service. Because if we can't laugh at ourselves, it's game over. If you take the job seriously and yourself not so much, right? So, but I'm really dead serious. So what do you guys think?
So, I'm gonna let Caleb jump in right away. I'm gonna get my 2 cents in. because Seth had to leave, so I have to sort of take over the moderating. Couldn't agree with you more. I often say when we're lecturing and we're talking about things like building construction and all that, why is this so hard to convey to firefighters? Because they don't have a grounding in it. You know, the truck company that I came on, was assigned to when I came on the job, was made up of quite literally, a house painter, a cement finisher, 2 electricians, an appliance repair, a TV repairman, which may be useless now, but to the point, right? They all went out and worked in a trade. So when you were talking about the changes to the built environment, they could teach you that in a way that they understood intuitively. My favorite example is the guys that taught me ground ladder work when I first came on the job were 2 guys off the engine, even though I was on the truck in the same house, because they were house painters. They threw ladders all day long, every day, you know, for hours and hours, up, down, up, down, up, down, not once or twice, every once in a while. So they were charged with that. So we're missing out on a lot of those skills. And if you're serious about this, I would suggest to you, and I'd be interested in other people's experience with this, is part of the reason it's hard to get credit for. See, the colleges won't give credit to the trade schools. So if I got a guy sitting right now, right, he drops in the middle of the, you know, environment, he's trying to get his master's degree so he can prepare to be fire chief. Well, his trade school classes won't transfer. He won't get any credit for that as he's trying to work his way towards his other degrees, right? So it's hard to motivate that young kid to take, you know, how do we give somebody credit for something or motivate them to take that kind of training if it's not going to translate into a college environment? So I think that's part of the challenge as we go forward, but it's something we have to wrestle with. And then, because I think it's critically important, I agree with you. Who's the dirty job?
Couldn't we do it internally though? I mean, couldn't we say, hey, your trade school say you go through a trade school. So trade schools, you know, they generally run, you know, sometimes a year or 2 years. Like if you want to go to welding school,
yeah,
that's like 2 years. So if you're a welder, that should be the equivalent of a freaking bachelor's degree. I mean, you know, I think, you know what I mean? I want to be able, at least in our industry, we may never be able to convince academia. Maybe some of our, you know, our really good partners like the Military Institute and CSU and some of our other really tight partners, I'm sure they would listen to us, and maybe we can crack the ice there on your point with colleges.
Yeah.
But I think for our departments, we ought to be sitting down at our staff meetings and saying, hey, time out a second. You know, where's trade school? You know, how are we given our you know, because I know some places, Pete, and I don't know if Chicago does it, but you know, my job started saying you had to have an associate's degree if you wanted to sit for the battalion chief's test. I think if the guy says, hey, I'm a welder, that's good enough.
Coming
Can I speak to that for a second, Pete?
Caleb, you had something to say. I don't want to cut anybody off, but I want to make sure we only got a few minutes left. So, Caleb, what'd you have?
I'll try to be quick, and I'm very aware of my lack of seniority in the group, but I think that gives me a little bit of a different perspective on this. I did trade. I went to trade school and I've done roofing and all that stuff, not very extensively, but I also have a master's degree, so I do have a perspective from both sides. And we're sort of looking at this on an either or kind of scale. And to me, it's not either or. Like, we're called to be firefighters to be all things. You know what I mean? Like, we're called to be firefighters to do all things. So it's really my job as a training officer, if I want people to know HR and to know how to throw a ladder, how to place a ladder, building construction, all of these things that you learn in the trades, that's my job to ensure that they're doing that. Now, when we look at it from a promotional perspective, you'll see a lot of departments, you know, they say associate's degree or equivalent, bachelor's degree or equivalent, master's degree or equivalent, and that can be super important. But one of the reasons why I was swayed to go on and get my master's degree, and I'm not looking to be a chief right now, but the timing was right for me to do it at the time that I did it, was because I read an article in Fire Engineering or Firehouse, one of them, that said, you know, whenever you're sitting in that city manager's office and you're arguing over the budget, you're arguing with people with those advanced degrees over the budget. And whenever the city manager says, you know, how am I going to spend this city's finite resources, it's helpful to have that ammunition. And there's also things that you learn in those degree programs that are helpful to be able to recall for those situations.
Sure. And
So Caleb, if I could for a second, I don't want you to get caught in the prism of two ideas, right? In other words, I'm not saying either or. I'm saying all. In other words, I want to do more.
Sure.
Because in many organizations, Caleb, trade school counts for 0.
Yeah, and it shouldn't. Chief
and I'm like you. I went through trade school and I went through formal college.
So, Pete, I just wanted to speak to the idea of giving credit for trades. In Massachusetts, there's a civil service administers all the exams, all the promotional exams, and it's 80% of your written grade, and then 20% is an experience mark. And the formula for that is time on the job, time and grade, a couple other things. But there's a section where you get points for education. And to date, the education has always been college degrees in certain specified associates, bachelor's, masters in specified subjects. And when I was in training, I was able to reach out to the people who administer that whole process and say, hey, can we start giving credit to people who have professional licensure, electricians, plumbers, HVAC, if they have their journeyman, if they have their masters, sort of count those trades as the equivalent, of an associate's, bachelor's. And, we're still in the process of trying to negotiate that with them. But I think that's, in our state anyway, that's one way to try and level the playing field there and give them some incentive and advantage to having those degrees in terms of promotional opportunities or, points on the exam anyway.
That's a really good point. And he brings up more than just a good point. That part of the concept is that we have to have a mechanism to make this work, right? The concept is important, and Bobby's giving us this overarching sort of concept about we have to include this, and most of us don't. We also have to find ways to execute it, to make it work, right? And Steve points out a really good example of how that can be done. Bobby? Or who else?
No, I love that, and I'm glad to hear Massachusetts is doing it. I know a couple of people up there, so I'll reach out and hopefully, and I don't want anybody to think it's either this or that. I think a well-rounded person, if you think of the firefighter, it's the old concept of what used to be called the Renaissance man, right? They were erudite, they were talented, they were physical, and I think that's where I'm going with it. I'm not saying to replace anything or ignore anything or downplay anything. I think all learning is important, but we have not given, to Steve's last point, any credence to people's trades education in terms of giving them points or credibility or promotion or even hiring and selection. So that's kind of where I'm trying to come from, Caleb, is to try to make it a relevant selection, a relevant point in your personal history as far as the fire service is concerned.
Hey,
Anybody else?
this is Norm up in Wisconsin, and I serve on the Engineering, Mathematics, and Science Board at the university. And one of the things which I can say about trade schools, a lot of times it depends upon how the trade school presents their classes to the university as to whether or not it's transferable. Now, it's not going to go through, let's say, we've used welding as an example. It's not going to go through as welding, but it may count as some general education credits that are required for your bachelor's or master's degree. So that there are options available. And it really depends upon that trade school, how they present themselves both to the student and then later on how they present themselves to the universities.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Norman, is that, a lot of these things, and I had some experience with this, even just getting regular fire or, the state certification classes recognized by the state school systems, the Office of the Fire Marshal classes, and getting that to work together took us years and years and years. And educational systems are, they resist change, my experience has been. And you've got to work very hard to make these kind of things happen. You're talking about a years-long or decades-long effort. It's not going to happen overnight. And they probably have good reason for it. I'm not trying to knock them. but I know that it was a lot of work. And so these are, you know, kind of things that we have to do over the long term. And I think that brings us to Bobby's point, is what are we doing internally as individual organizations? Because a lot of that is within our control. As we're hiring, as we're promoting, giving these individuals credit for these experiences, it's incumbent upon us. We can get the ball rolling on our own. We don't have to wait for heaven and earth to be moved through the educational system. We can have some impact ourselves. So a lot of good input here, a lot of good discussion. I want to circle around back a little bit. Bobby talked a little bit about FDIC. He started off the program. Does anybody have any questions for Bobby regarding FDIC? It switched to August. What's going on? Any of that kind of stuff?
If Bobby could just give us the dates again.
The dates?
Gladly. It'll be August 19. That's when the hot will begin. So we'll have 19 and 20 will be the 2 hot days in the workshops. And then a Saturday is, I believe, the 20th, and the 21st is Sunday. So classrooms will be 20, 21, 22, and the exhibit floor will open up on Saturday afternoon and run through. So our meeting generally is on that Wednesday. So our meeting would probably be Wednesday, Thursday for the Instructor Society, and I'm sure Lee will be able to get that date. Obviously, we'll still be having our meeting. So if you're in the Instructor Society, we'll still be doing that. We have our awardee, Pat McKinney, who for the Instructor of the Year. That will be on Sunday. So Pat will be getting his award on Sunday. So Peter, we'll need you on stage Sunday, and we'll have Pat receive his award. So I rolled everything from 2020 over to 2021, and I know we're going to have some folks that can't be there. So we may have some minor changes just because I've already had one dear friend who his family does something that time every year, and he just cannot not be there. And the call for presentations is going to go out the regular time. It'll be April of this year. So if you'd like to teach for us, you're more than welcome to put in for it. Everybody is welcome, especially if you're in the Instructor Society. Obviously, please put that in your bio so we know that, and we can give you, due deference. And we do have the instructor selection group that pulls a couple of new instructors who are new instructors in the society whom you guys want to bring forward. And I think we have those selections teaching this year. Lee, if they can't make it for any reason and we need to do substitutions, we'd be happy to do that for you. So that's what's going on: hands-on training, workshops, classrooms, exhibit board, just like always. It's FDIC, and I don't believe housing is open yet, but as soon as it's open, we'll be putting that out there. Obviously, the instructors are handled by us, but as soon as we can get that up, we'll get that out there for you. So I appreciate you giving me the time to put that up there. But all our normal stuff as the Instructor Society will still be happening. So, and again, if you're the director of a state training facility, you're Instructor of the Year for the state, and your Firefighter of the Year get to come to FDIC. Their admission is comped by us. So North American Training Directors always make sure we get those people. So if you're the Instructor of the Year or the and you're a member of the society, you're coming anyway. Bring a friend. But it'll be summertime, so the fun run will be on. So Peter and I will be running in our shorts, and Pete told me he's gonna buy me a Speedo. The two of us are gonna swim the canal, and so we'll have that to look forward to. But I think it'll be fun. It'll be a little bit different. It'll be the summer, so I look forward to seeing you all there. And as in every FDIC, if you're not an instructor, the housing stuff does fill up fast, and I apologize, but it's just a numbers game. And we really just want to see everybody. And I think Tony said it. There's just nothing like the in-classroom experience when you're sitting there and you're looking at a Caleb, or you're looking at a Norm or Phil Jose, and you're listening to Phil explain velocity and pressures and smoke, and there's just nothing like it, because you can see and you can almost feel Phil's excitement as he's going through his presentation, and then you've got him right there, and you can walk up after the class and touch and feel him and get to know Phil Jose, or get to know Pete Van Dorf, and get to know Steve Chikarotis is going to be keynoting on Wednesday, and you get a chance to actually meet Steve Chikarotis, who and not not that Pete and I are stalkers or anything, but and we've worked with him. He's been our friend forever, but he's still one of our biggest heroes. Always will be. He's a one-of-a-kind kind of man. I think you'd agree with me on that, Pete. There's just nobody like him.
Yeah, he's a unique. He's one of the 1%, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. And so that's all I got. Sorry.
Well, thank you, Bobby. Rodney, did you have something for us? I saw you raising your hand.
I just wanted to plug the Hall of Legends, Legacies, and Leaders from the National Fire Heritage Center at the conference as well.
Very good. You're welcome.
That's right, Rodney. That's right, Rodney. You're exactly right. So we've got 6 from last year, and Rodney, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've got like 16 from this year.
I think we got close to 20 this year.
Wow, that's great.
So Rodney and I have to get together and rack our brains how to do that with some kind of we'll figure it out. But yeah, the Hall of Legends, we've got, so that's, wow, 25 or 26 people we've got to recognize. So we're going to figure that out, but that's also going to be part of main program. So that's also very, very cool.
Outstanding. Okay, we're bumping right up at the end of our time, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bobby, thanks for making the time. I know how busy you are. And everybody, keep safe, keep well, and we'll see you shortly.
Hey,
Love you. God bless.
Everybody keep Seth in your thoughts while Big Sky runs their one fire this year.
Okay. And register for the conference.
That's so wrong. What's wrong with you? That's terrible.
No, that was perfect. Just beat me to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's how all these.
That's Forrest Reader.
Hey, Bobby, big Sky job town.
Big fun.
Be safe, everybody.
Remember, our conference is coming up in March. Register for the conference. Tell all your friends.
I'll be there.